Hello and welcome to Unplugged, an IoT podcast where we dive deep into the fascinating world of industrial Internet of Things and automation. I'm your host, Phil Seboa.
G'day, Phil, and hi, everyone. My name is Ed Fuentes. Well, Phil, we've had some interesting guests, obviously over the seasons, people who've been in the manufacturing industry, created solved solutions, system integrated businesses, end users. And there's been that occasional time where people who've worked in the manufacturing industry for a long time and found a problem and then developed a solution. Well, today's guest is that sort of person. He's Rafael Amaral. He's the CTO. He's the co-founder of TilliT. Now, he's had that many years of experience in manufacturing and digital transformation, and through that, he's been at the forefront of reshaping industrial operations and developed this solution called TilliT. He's very passionate, as you have to be, right? When you sort of develop a product or a software solution that solves problems, he's transitioning businesses from, moving away from Phil, you and I have seen that across the factory floor. Spreadsheets, paper, just gets in the way of that digital transformation. So very, very happy to have a chat today to Rafael Amaral.
Rafael, welcome to the show. Can you maybe start with just how your journey has developed in the manufacturing sector and what inspired you to start, TilliT?
No, thanks for that. And thanks for having me here. I mean, I really like your show and you had some really, big names in it. So it's a real pleasure to be here, to be invited to be here. Yeah, so I think it's been 20 years now that I've been working on, the digital space, a lot in manufacturing. I started my career really in the IT side. So I used to be an SAP consultant and went all the way to like the guru level. So I used to do really big projects, optimization, really complicated supply chain planning. And then I joined Nucon. So before co-founding TilliT, I co-founded a company in Australia called Nucon, which is a part of the Sage Group. So in Nucon, we were really building a lot of custom applications and MES, working with data. My story really started there, where I was building custom solutions for big names in Australia, and then we realized that we were doing this over and over again. So from the supply chain aspect, working on the IT and then going to more manufacturing execution, more inside the factory, it was visible to me that there was a massive hole that nobody was paying attention to. It felt that way, and that it was worth dedicating. So we convinced our sponsors to kind of give us some seed money for us to go out and build TilliT. So yeah, that's kind of the seed.
Wow. Can you give us, some insight into some of the customers you're potentially looking at? How were you building sort of those really early stage MES type applications, especially with TilliT?
Yeah, exactly. So it was, the first big project was just a customer that came to us in Nucon that wanted a quality system, right? So pretty simple quality system. So they hired us to help them picking the software. So we took the requirements, we went into the main players, and we looked at, do you have all these requirements? And we looked at the main players. This was 10 years ago, and none of them had a fit. None could solve the simple, typical quality requirements that this company had, unless you really customize the hell out of the system. So this is where we decided to say, you know what? Why don't we build it for you? Do you want us to build it? And they say yes. So that was my first quality MESC type, and we decided to do that with a workflow back engine, and that was a decision that was really well made. That we decided to say, you know what? Let's do this not from a transactional perspective, just a paper and glass form that fill in, the quality results, but do it from an operator perspective. And I think that was the secret sauce. But we realized that the workflow engines that exist as well, they're not really suited for manufacturing. So if you take BPMN, for instance, which is an old technology for workflow definition, it doesn't work that well with the kind of problem that manufacturing have, right? So if you're doing like a workflow for a expense claim, right? You may have, all right, if the expense claim is above $1,000, you need approval from that person. If it's above $10,000, you need that person, right? But when we talk about manufacturing, the number of combinations of characteristics or you're producing explodes to like infinite. So when we went into TilliT, we took the learnings from that project and say, you know what, we're gonna have to build our own. We're gonna have to build our own version of the engine, and it works really well nowadays. We start to just expand from different industries and started to apply this mentality, this philosophy. It's working really well.
MES is that acronym or that phrase that people get afraid of in a way. I mean, large companies seem to have the budget. Well, that's the perception to connect that OT, IT layer, that production manufacturing execution system. And it seems and it sounds complex. And we know there's not one product that solves MES. As you mentioned, you fix the quality issue in a particular area. So how does TilliT, well, a couple of things here. One is, what's the misconceptions that companies have that you've found when they want to implement MES? What are the things they're not doing right, or what's the wrong things? And how does TilliT, in your case, simplify that process for them?
I mean, it's a good question, and it's interesting because on one hand, you have the complexity coming from the history of how those MES tools were built, right? So they were built, many years ago. They started to apply in multiple industries. So you would have one tool that can fit in virtually any industry. And when you look at it, when you look at how to use that tool, you realize that it's super complicated. So you need an engineer with 10 plus years of experience to be able to understand how to set that tool up. But what happened to me especially was because I came from an IT background and apps, I used to build app for Apple Store, so I had this mindset that came from basic principles and look at the problem. So instead of coming from, like bottom up engineering, I came from the perspective of, from an application, from a user perspective, we got to solve, track and trace. All right, that's pretty simple. Like you do this, that's track and trace. You got to solve quality. Oh, actually, it's not too bad because all you got to do is this. So we started building TilliT from that basic principle and everything was questioned. And what we did was we just kind of remove all the excess complexity that we see that exists. And it turns out we can actually implement the requirement and you didn't have to have all that complication, So it's maybe because we cherry picked what we wanted to solve. So maybe we might not be solving every single possible use case in the world. But for the companies that tried us, it works. They implement quickly and they understand. So I think there was a lot of care in making sure that even the configuration is written in a way that you can understand, that it's logical, right? As well as the user interface from the operator. We spend a ton of time in UX, in making it look good, because we know that we're talking to people, right? So if you bring an ugly UI with a big table and small font, people are not going to like that. So there was a lot of care around the operator. So in summary, I think that it's basic principle. It's operator first, and it's meant to be used by somebody that's not an engineer.
Yeah, and then adoption rates are much higher. People accept the platform to be able to use it more often. They actually enjoy using the platform as well.
Yeah, we just went live this week on a big factory, and we just had today the feedback, from the main person that was implementing on the customer side, and she did all the training, and then she was just talking that all the operators were having feedback that no, this is simple to use. She showed them how to do once, and then that was enough to say, okay, now you look back and they're starting the next order, they're running the changeover, they're doing the downtime reasons. So I think that's 100% part of it, is having that attention to UX to, because we just don't have the patience or I don't know. I think it has to have a level of motivation there. We're so used to like Spotify, Netflix, everything looking good and intuitive. So that should apply to our business tools as well.
Sometimes it feels like the easy it looks on the outside must be complex in the back end to make it look nice at the front end. But though it seems like you've created a modular sort of platform where the complexity is sort of removed from the implementation, but yet you haven't sacrificed user experience and user
Yeah.
engagement.
And the other thing that we really try hard not to sacrifice is capability, right? Because what happens is no matter how simple you make this, manufacturing is complicated. So
Yeah.
it could be a factory with 10 people. Once you understand the process and you realize what everybody needs to do, you realize that the nature of the beast is complicated. So what we like to say in TilliT as well is that, listen, it's really easy to set it up, your first thing. But if you want to make this as a smart factory, if you want to integrate this with that and make it tick, you can. You can put code here. You can put, some logic and smarts there. So, but it's very important to have like an easy start, so that you get in, you start the journey, but you will keep improving the configuration and the setup for months, if not years to come, because the maturity increases, which you then change the tool and then increase the maturity, and it's a cycle. So we didn't want to be the super complicated tool that takes a year to go live or 18 months to go live. And we also didn't want to be that too simple of a tool that the customer outgrows it in a year. So you implement a dashboard. After 6 months, the customer says, okay, we got this. What then? What now? Because I'm still having all my issues going on. I can see them now. That's great. But they're still happening,
Yeah, exactly. I think, having that right balance between off-the-shelf type operations and modules and those types of areas, and making it agile enough to conform to their business processes. It's a real fine line, and we always kind of talk about in the industry as about you're not really going to get an off-the-shelf, MES system, and you're going to find it difficult. Yeah. So it sounds like you've struck the right balance there between.
Yeah, it is a fine line, because the more power you give, the more complicated it gets. The less power you give, the more limiting it gets. We like to say that it's kind of a Lego TilliT. You have all these functionalities that you need to learn. You're going to learn the first 5, and then later, as you need, you're going to learn the other ones. And then it's how you compose that. So it's very composable. But yeah, we have some customers doing some really fancy stuff. That's really interesting.
Awesome. I guess from an evolution point for manufacturers, many of whom are, developing their own systems in-house. I mean, I've been involved with a company that built their MES system within Excel, and, have that running. System, sorry. It's a sort of MES system, okay? And so they built lots of custom scripts within that Excel, macros to manage their inventory systems and those types of approaches. I guess, how can manufacturers move on from the spreadsheet economy to a digital system? What are those, prerequisites? What could you advise in that space?
Yeah, no, and I think spreadsheets and paper, because believe it or not, there's so many companies nowadays that run by paper in manufacturing. And I think that's kind of what struck me when I started to go into this world and look at, like an A3 sheet, where you had to say, okay, this top section of this sheet, you have to fill with, safety instance. This section, you have to do 1 hour checks. So yeah, the other day I had one of my partners, come to me and say, hey, I just built this workflow in TilliT. It was super cool. And this workflow alone replaced 3 spreadsheets. Right. So the reality is that the problem is not that you can't do it. The problem is that once you start to understand and like the landscape, you're going to find that there's like hundreds of these sheets, right? So the best approach I've seen is the land and expand. So take it, for instance, an example with one of the case studies that we did with Ibero, which is what they do is equipment for trucks, right? So they do axles and all that. I went to visit the site, and it's massive. So they took the hottest spot of issues and problems, which is all the validations, and they had a spreadsheet, and they had a paper form, and they had all the SOPs in paper format, and they put a workflow activity there. And it was, I don't know, 3 months, they reduced 90% of the errors. It was insane, just because it's visible, it's clear, the problem, and everybody knows that's being tracked. So it didn't take a genius or an engineer to do that. It was very, very simple. So I think that there was a massive amount of low-hanging fruit in this space, that all you got to do is look at the problem, right? And say, okay, what is the problem here? Oh, I have to train the operator. I can't trust that the operator is actually doing what they should be doing. I don't have a way to trend this, to understand the Pareto of the issues. And then you take that and you put it in the workflow. And once you understand how the workflow works, it's so trivial. All you got to do is take every action that the operator has to do and think about it. What they have to do, when they have to do, and where they have to do it. And then you realize that everything can be modeled that way. And that's how TilliT works. What, where, and when. It's simple. It's trivial. So again, it's really easy to start, because you go and say, okay, let's take one station that's a bit independent from the others, and let's put it in. And then you realize, oh, this works. Oh, let's put a next station. And you start moving with this land expand approach.
In that space, because, with the paperwork you mentioned, a lot of people are entering data that's important for that capturing on the paper. You've digitized it, created a much easier workflow to see trends, to see Pareto. And that integration with people is very important. I think having that digital platform solves it. And then the other thing comes around the machinery, that data that sometimes is entered manually.
Yeah.
And sometimes, have you seen it where maybe data should be brought in automatically?
Yeah.
So that they can get real time. And sometimes how crucial is it in modern manufacturing to capture the data live? And that IoT, I suppose that's one of a better phrase, to integrate that information seamlessly. How do you see that running? How do you see that adopting? Do you see adoption in that, or is it still very manual?
No, 100%. I mean, first, we go into a lot of sites, and this is the majority of sites that I visit, they will have all the machinery completely offline, right? And I'm not talking SCADA. No. This is way lower than that, right? So we've deployed to places where what we did was we had a IoT wireless sensor, right? So with a couple of $100, you can just connect it. So you don't have to think about cabling and, like PLCs and aggregated PLCs and all that. A couple of $100, it's connected. And then you go into TilliT and say, all right, this counter is representing of this machine. And then from there, I can derive stoppages, I can derive, speed, performance, everything, right? So I think what IoT gave us is the capability of short circuit and speed up the I'm not saying that this is the best way of doing this. I'd much rather go into a factory with a full SCADA and everything already there, because then you can just connect it all in one go. But I don't need to wait for a 2-year PLC upgrade and cabling around the factory for me to start adding value, right? I don't have to wait. So I think there's a little bit of that. And the other thing that's interesting about when you start to connect to the data, because obviously you can't think about just one dimension. You can think about, all right, I need the most important thing in the world for me is OE. That's a dimension. The reality is that connecting will give you the OE. But what else can you get from there? Oh, now I understand that the order started. So let me validate that I have the right raw material. How about that? I validate that I'm using the right raw material into the line, so I'm not making a mistake with the wrong bottle. So very simple check, so much value. Like every single customer that I interviewed post go live, they said that 1 week after the go live, the operator was stopped by the system from putting the wrong raw material in.
Wow.
And you're like, does this
Wow.
happen?
Yeah, exactly.
It does. It does. And you can go right now into the supermarket, look at the shelf. And unfortunately, I will tell you that there's a big chance that some of these shelves have the wrong raw material. I had another client, and then you think that, okay, no, let's just put technology. Let's just put a vision system. I went to this factory. They had a massive camera looking at the line, and I asked the plant manager, I said, well, what's this camera doing? Oh, it's validating that the label of the product is correct. Oh, great. And then I look at the beginning of the line, and they were putting product inside the conveyor. And which camera is validating the product? So you had the right label, but you didn't know you had the right product, you know? So this kind of solution is so simple to implement. Scan a barcode, check, done. You don't, again, it goes back at what we were talking about, the MES. Do you need a super complicated MES? Maybe you do, right? Maybe you're in an industry that you're trying to do lights out, that you're trying to, that is super complicated by nature, that you need a control recipe, that you need all the, absolutely. But I'm telling you, 80% of the factories are not like that, right? So if you start those factories with a basic principle and say, all right, we need to make sure that we get the right raw material in. What do I need? Oh, I need BOM and I need a barcode scanner. That's it, you know? So you got even a little effect there. So, I think you can add a ton of value because there is so much low-hanging fruit that you don't need all those, you know, like it's hard to get from 90% efficient to 100% efficient.
Yeah.
This is where you need, you know, big data, you need, you know, serious statistics, and you need AI. But most of these factories are running at 40, 30, you know? So this is why I stopped everything. I was doing super high-end, complicated optimization. I stopped it because there's a low-hanging fruit here that everywhere I knock, you know, there's value to be achieved. I'm a value-driven person. I'm going to chase the biggest value. And after I build a few of them, I realized I was doing the same thing over and over. Let's build a SaaS that is a fourth of the price of your normal, you know, tool that delivers the value in a really short amount of time, right? And that's where we are.
Yeah, that's, you know, we've talked about these off the shelf type solutions, right? And just, you know, you're talking about TilliT and how it delivers that really quick to value proposition there is pretty important when we're talking about, you know, investment in those, you know, opportunities to improve. You know, we hear about the stories of MES and OEE type you know, projects, and you know, they deliver and they're sitting at these 90% OEE values, and the truth of the matter is that that's not necessarily the case. You have to validate that data. You have to make sure that it's really not a manufactured outcome, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, OE is great. There's, especially if you coming into a factory and you don't know what's going on, then having that, you know, traffic light of, you know, this line has a problem, let's pay attention to it. Or if you deliver downtime reason, I think there's a massive value there, because just giving you the Pareto of why are we having issues, it drives all the CI approach. But what I like about the approach of this digital operations, which is the manufacturing workflow approach, is that it's not just about a KPI. All the KPIs are a sub-product of the workflow. So it's not like you're building data for data. What you're doing is it's a management system. So this is how you have to understand, because the big differentiator is it's so workflow driven. And when I talk about workflow is consumptions, productions, quality, OE, safety, every single element gets put into TilliT as here, hey, Mr. Operator, you're going to start the order. I'm going to tell you what to do each moment of time. And depending on the classification of the product that you're making, I'm going to tell you different things. So this notion of a co-pilot that's telling, hey, do this now, it's kind of ways. Can you actually go into Cine and go from A to B without Google Maps on your phone, on your car? You can't. So every operator, every order, and I see this, based on the stats, each order in an average factory will be about 200 steps. Think about it. You have to remember each one of them, when to do it, how to do it, and which one to do it and which not to do it. Because if this product has allergen, you're going to have to do X, Y, Z. If this product is for the Korean market, you have to do, X, Y, Z. And the number of, nightmare horror stories that I've heard of product getting shipped to country A with labels written in language B, or a product getting shipped to Italy with CO2, sparkling, and it's not supposed to be a sparkling, just because somebody forgot to bloody, set the machine. So we pay a lot of attention to the machine. The machine's perfect. The OE is very driven to the machine in the end. I know it has elements about the rest of the process, but it's very machine driven. So yeah, a machine is running beautifully, but it has the wrong input. Yeah, it's all calibrated. Yeah, but it's the wrong set point because somebody forgot to change it. It's printing the wrong best before date. So this is all reality, guys. This is not even like an exception. This is the rule. That's why I'm working so much on this, because every time I go to these places, you find these horror stories.
It's interesting you say that, because they've been running like that for years, right?
Yeah.
They've been managing it. It's not as if MES is new. It's not about digitization being new, but there's a space, there's a spot there or a time when they go, or maybe how you prepare, maybe how you present it, whatever it is that you say, look, let's do this. Let's move, like you said, let's pick a low-hanging fruit, something that's simple, something that has a quick turnaround, that's user-friendly. And of course, they're going to ask you, well, because it costs money, there's no doubt. I mean, it's not free. Then there'll be some discussion around ROI, or what's my return. How do you get past that point? I mean, that point where, yes, Mr. Owner, you have to separate some money here. And they already know there's problems, right? I don't think they're coming in blind. They know there is an issue. How do you get them past that point? And how do you manage the ROI discussion? And what is some of the key? I mean, you've talked about some successes already, but what do you see at the end?
Yeah, I think that the ROI is a great question, because some companies will have enough visibility of their costs and their deviations to, come up with an ROI, but some companies don't. And they bundle everything into a big bucket, and then you actually don't even know out of the bucket how much of that is you can achieve or not, right? So there is a fallacy around, you need an MES to be able to calculate the ROI, but you don't have that, So there's a little bit of that. I think that, and there's also a little bit of, like we were talking in the beginning, these projects were extremely expensive because of the license cost and because of the project engineering. So we're talking about projects of 18 months. We're talking about millions of dollars in getting to go live, right? So that means that you need to find an ROI that pays, that investment. But again, you don't have the data to back that up. So then it becomes a matter of, okay, we kind of feel that, but can you put, the money in it? So the way we've been trying to break that is basically reducing the barrier to entry. So we can, like I said before, we can start very small into one part of the plant, and this will knock you off, $10,000, $20,000, right? So this will give you, all right, we have visibility now. We've spotted that the operator is doing a better job on this area. So now I'm comfortable to roll out to the other areas. So by dropping the price, you drop the value equation, right, to make it easier to get in, because everybody can be convinced that they can get in, but people just don't have that assurance that the value is going to come. They just don't know because they don't have the data to back it up. It's different when you're buying a new equipment that you can calculate, okay, this is going to give me X units more, right? So that's a little bit of the challenge on investment in OT, because you always have that avenue. So I could be running 40% performance and I just buy a new equipment. Suddenly, like I double my productivity. I could be tripling it, but I just double it by brute forcing and buying equipment. So I think these are the key components. But then every company is different, and especially every manager, director, COO, and strategy is different, right?
Yeah, it's really hard to put a dollar figure on visibility, right? And the unknown of, the result of
Yeah.
these types of implementation as well. So it's really interesting to hear, that, a direct result of these projects is actually just understanding what your costs are and where you can improve even more. So starting small and land and expand type philosophy really helps with that
Yeah.
as well, because you can start
And
identifying those.
and I think I'm not sure if that's the part of the problem, but the other thing I see, the other dimension I see, like I said, I like to see TilliT as a management tool, and that one of the biggest benefit is like reduction of mistakes and wastes. So I think that the moment that you that run a factory admit that you have 100 operators that are going by their own set of rules, by their own set of knowledge, tribal knowledge, and then you as a plant manager that is still fundamentally responsible for the quality of the product that goes out, you're not there on their shoulders looking over every single step of the way, and then you realize that you actually don't have visibility of that layer. I have visibility of machines, but I don't have visibility of the operators. Then you realize, okay, I need to take control of that. I can't have my factory run by paper and by people. And I think one thing that has driven us to driven a little bit more of that momentum, Ed and Phil, is really COVID came in and it kind of shifted a little bit the workforce. So it brought these operators that usually you could count them for 20 years on a factory, and suddenly they're doing gig economy. They're because it's, I don't know, better, nicer, whatever. So we find a lot of factories nowadays struggling to recruit new people. And if I tell you that it takes about 5 to 7 years for an operator to be solo on a station, and once we have TilliT in, most of these customers report a massive reduction in training requirement, because remember all those rules, it's in the system now. So now you start to add another layer that we haven't spoken to before, which is knowledge management, right? So now you have the system with the algorithm and the operating system of the factory inbuilt into the master data.
You're removing all those. You mentioned at the beginning about this, in manufacturing, there are so many combinations, so many ways to get things done. And I think through that knowledge that you're building, you almost put them in buckets, making it a bit more, not predictable, but definitely process driven.
It is quite predictable, Ed. Like this is very repeatable. For you to make this product is basically in most industries, I mean, not all industry, but some are very artsy, but a lot of industries, it's very simple. You have this route, you have this, steps. That's the rule. And the rule was invented by history, by accreditations. So you got to do that because you have like a food and bev accreditation. You have to do that because you're exporting. You need to prove that you've done that. So, but the level of is insane once you actually understand these steps. And it's funny to see how even the customers get surprised by the level of complication once we decode all the rules into the system and they realize, oh my God, this is way more complicated than I thought.
I mean, that's the holy grail, right? Is predictability of product, consistency and quality outputs, right? Yeah. So if you change the process, then you're going to reduce your quality or you're going to change something, right? So we want consistency within our production lines. So that means predictability. That means that we have the same raw materials coming into the system. We have the same operators, hopefully, on the lines, right? To the level of training that they need to operate at the predictable level as well. So yeah, absolutely. I can see the benefits of having a regimented process and workflow that doesn't change much. Maybe it might introduce different ingredients at different levels, but we're managing recipes at that level, and maybe that might become a bit more complex in that solution there.
That's it
as well. I guess as you see MES, from being in the industry, and have you kind of noticed any sort of trends, or you've got any predictions for the future of MES? I mean, we've seen some AI type, things coming in. Are you seeing some of that heading that way?
No, absolutely. I mean, we've added, ChatGPT into TilliT like a few months ago, like almost a year now. So we are adding more and more of that capability into the platform because, like I said before, a lot of this has to do with knowledge management. A lot of this has to do with complexity, and these tools are really good at distilling some of that complexity. There's obviously, we are building a massive pool of data. That's another element. If we focus only on machine-driven data, that gives you a layer, but there's so much things that's going on that has to do with behavior, that has to do with things that happens in the factory, around the people, around that you don't have any tracking of that. So there's a lot of potential to take that information, push it into an AI model, and start to understand the factory holistically. Right, not just the machine, but also the material and the people.
In that, Raf, I mean, you're right. I've just thought about that. You've got all these TilliT applications installed across different industries, different factories, and you probably can start segmenting certain industries that are succeeding or winning. Are there industries that you find that they are lagging? They're lagging. They need to do something quickly. And what are the industries that are just booming?
I wouldn't say that an industry is lagging or booming itself, but I do find a massive difference between companies and companies.
Okay.
On the same industry.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite shocking because you would see, you would look at this big company, good brand, and you would have really high expectations, and then you start to uncover and you realize that, they're doing their process in Excel spreadsheets with conditioning format as the main driver of decision making. So, but then again, I have small companies, 2 lines, and they work like a clockwork. And it's beautiful to see. So, unfortunately, it has to do with, the people, really. All we do is give tools. We do not take over the manufacturing. We give them tools. And these tools, they give you clear evidence and of level of control over the process. So you can choose to be extremely, disciplined. You can choose to be average, or you can choose to be not at all. So I think that there is a lot around, management to understand, to give that culture of, guys, this is your work. You just have to do it, properly as we defined. And if you can't do it, let us know, because we'll change the process for it to be doable. I think that the people that recognizes the power and this layer of management that I keep talking about, it's not about analytics, it's about management, you know? So if you can represent your rules and kind of a puppeteer your, you know, changing the system to drive people and they are following, you know, the commands, you are able to build a factory that has all the cogs of the machines linked with the cogs of the people in perfect synergy. And yeah, I can show you customers that do that well and customers that needs to work on that. Now, if you don't have a system like that, you wouldn't even know. You know, like, at least this system allows you to kind of understand where you are at.
And with the pace, I suppose, of industry and the pace of business, how important is it for businesses who don't have a digital type of MES?
Listen, yeah,
Well, how do you know, we hear predictions, people saying you must have, you know, in this world, like I talked to a customer the other day and he said to me, if you're not digitally transformed by 2030, you're finished. I mean, if you don't have any plan of, and in that is MES, digital MES.
yeah.
How do you see it?
All right. So I think what's happening right now is that a lot of these leaders, they are getting to the point where they don't see this as acceptable. I think in the past, that was just the way it is, and manufacturing is meant to be, you know, paper based, and we don't have the ROI to spend $5 million on an MES system, and it's gonna slow us down, and blah blah blah. But I went to this factory, and it's a factory where you don't want ingredients to be mixed up. Let's put it that way. And I'm walking the factory, and I'm seeing all these bags of ingredients, and none of them has barcodes. So that means that the operator needs to read the code and, you know, visually check that this code matches to that kind of thing. And then I went to the president and said, listen, I walked, I pitched, I did a demo to the plant manager. I'm telling you, there's a fit. I can solve your problem. It's up to you to see if there's value or not, right? Because I don't know your costs, I don't know your expenses. So, and then he came to me and said, Raf, we just can't run a factory on paper. You know what I mean? So his approach was, forget ROI. It's kind of, you gotta do this the way you know, like it's mandatory, right? It's obvious and mandatory. So I think that's a shift, because 10 years ago, first, maybe that person wouldn't even know that the factory was on paper because they're probably sitting on a corporate and not going to the factory. That's the number one. Because I've seen that, you know, COOs not knowing, you know, what goes on. And second, all the excuses of every factory is like that. We've been doing that for 40 years, you know, all that. But I think it's been shifting for all the reasons I told you, you know, workforce, knowledge, management, reducing mistakes. And then it's starting to become kind of obvious we need this, right? Now, in terms of competitiveness, right? So why should you do this? Is because your competitor is doing. So I've been on you know, tech roadmaps for digital transformation where the vision of the COO was half the operational cost. So if your competitor is able to half their operational cost, they can come into with a product that's, you know, 30% cheaper, get more profit, and kill you. So I think what happens right now is that this, you know, 40% OEE, you know, $70 million a year of waste that we don't know where it came from, where it's going, you just can't have those anymore because your competitor is reducing them. So you got to do it too.
Yeah, and that only comes from visibility.
I think visibility is one layer.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that this is so low hanging fruit that there's a component of a system that's management. So what is management? Is you, Phil, can't go into your ERP and create a product and create an invoice to a customer that doesn't exist. That's management. The system will stop you, right? The system won't let you create an invoice and pay to a bank account that doesn't exist. That's management, right? As a byproduct of that is visibility, is analytics, is trending. For me, that's a byproduct because the bar is so low that you need to do the basics. The basics for me is, all right, what do you have to do on this product? I have to consume this ingredient. If I don't have a barcode scanning that checks that the ingredient is in the BOM, why should you do a predictability of yield? Like you don't even know if it's the right ingredient.
Yeah.
So you see how what I did was I realized that 80% was so low in that area in the manufacturing, because in supply chain they're pretty high up. In complexity, and it doesn't go to all factories. Obviously, there are factories that are super high end in terms of that maturity, but it was just shocking to see how many was like lagging, right? And these ones are the ones that you can create a simple product and a project, and you're gonna get the ROI, easily, because we are making basic mistakes.
I think Raf, through that journey you've done with building in your business, and you started industrial automation and then building TilliT, going to customers, you've just been learning more about the whole process. And I know we're wrapping up the podcast now, and we are towards the end of the podcast. We like to ask our guests about that learning phase. You've been learning so much, and you've been so focused in this space, and it comes out with your passion and your guidance. So it's fantastic. So, what about going forward? What is RAP learning? What are you looking at learning, and then getting that extra oomph in your business?
Yeah, I mean, we keep scaling, TilliT. So we started with a small factory in Australia, and then we had a bigger factory, and then a bigger factory. So there's always a new challenge that we need to solve. I think that, one of the cool things about, UNS, for instance, is that it is really a technology that is solving big scale problems in terms of, multi-sites and so on. So there's a lot of new challenge that we start to face once you start to deal with, big enterprise. I'm talking about, 80 sites. So if you're going to implement TilliT into an 80 size enterprise, what are the challenges? You're going to still have the local site challenge that I've described the whole day. But then you need to talk about, okay, how do we aggregate all this into like a big network that we can compare the different sites together? So it's super, super interesting. So yeah, I keep diving into all these areas of, data and cloud, and there's so much there, right? I think you never stop learning in that area, and there's always new stuff, and yeah, I mean, every new customer gives you a new challenge. Doesn't matter if the same industry, different industries, they always come with a curveball to say, okay, how the hell are we going to solve this problem?
Yeah, we're all on that learning journey and trying to keep up with the latest and greatest in technology or processes, or just really best practices as well. So yeah, it's really great to hear that you're still on that learning journey, and you're still identifying problems to solve, right? And that's awesome to hear. Raf, it's been an insightful conversation, and I'd like to give you some opportunity maybe just to talk about what you, maybe some final thoughts and advice for manufacturers considering, digital transformation or MES application development.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key ones is really around this concept of the hidden layers that we don't see a lot of people talking about. Yeah, so we have a massive amount of effort being thrown into data analytics and like looking at machine data and all that, and then we keep forgetting a big chunk of a factory's P&L, which is the operator. We keep forgetting that there is a holistic thing going on in the factory that goes beyond, PLCs and IOs and so on. So I think that, first, recognizing that we got to pay attention to that as well. The factory needs to pay attention to that as well. I mean, obviously they do, but from a technology perspective. And I think that the other thing is, again, data is amazing, and it gives you the visibility, it gives you the analytics to kind of come up with solutions, to come up with insights. But we also need to think about system as being a management system. we have to think about systems being a bit more fundamental, you know, telling what to do, telling you what not to do, double checking your work, and, you know, respecting the business rules that the company itself decided to set them. So I think that, you know, coming in, and it's a big deal, right? Because coming in with this notion of, you know, management and operator and holistic approach, but also being able to deliver that with a simplistic approach that allows you to have proper citizen developers. You know, our first implementation, the person that set up the whole system was a quality manager that has zero technical knowledge. So I think being able to do all those things whilst not needing a software engineer, because they're expensive, they take a long time to actually build them. I think this opens up a lot of the opportunity there for some people. So just opening up the mind for this new stream of possibility, I think it's really, really, really a great thing to do right now.
Fantastic. That's a great summary there, Raf, around management, operators, that holistic approach. Not so much focus on the technology underneath, but getting
Correct.
that part right in the business. And their technologies come, technologies go, and they get better obviously through time. And obviously, what you've done, you've created incredible technology through TilliT. But it's not the technology; it's what it provides managers, what it provides operators, what it can do for a business. Look, it's fantastic having experts like yourself, Raf, who've not just built it, but you're not just built it, but you're implementing and you're involved in community and industry. So it's fantastic. It makes a huge difference for us. So thank you so much for
Well,
joining us today.
thank you. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure.